Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung with me, Kindar, the Tiger Right, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor, who I forgot to introduce on the previous one. Oh well. Today we are doing chapter 52. I think we're far enough, Miss said, looking back at the way they came. They were halfway to the trap room. They shouldn't be able to hear us. Is it necessary to do this here? Kindar asked as Kirina took the papers out from inside her robe. We have done the first floor multiple times, and it is aimed at Omegas. I want to make sure nothing's changed, Jekyll said. It would be just like the dungeon to change everything on us. Tibbs watched Jekyll look over the charcoal map, but he was listening. The hissing had always happened in response to something one of them did or said. He wasn't entirely certain he'd heard the voices anymore. It had been over a month now, and Kirina's explanation that he'd been dying and his essence was trying to save him had made more and more sense. But the hissing had been around long before that, so he was alert for the next time it sounded. Everything's the same, Kirina said, pointing to the writing. He looked it over in the room. It's not all the same, Jekyll indicated the marks. Tibbs says those aren't where the triggers were the last time. Right, Tibbs? Yes, he answered, distracted by his visual, but the dungeon always changes them now, so that's normal. There's more rats in the boulder room and warren room, Jekyll said, starting to think this exchanging information wasn't a good idea, Miss commented. Tandy had given Tibbs 3 pages a few days after the first free-for-all, so they could draw their map, and then P&'s team would had what they'd encountered. Jekyll had wanted Tibbs to get them paper. Tibbs wouldn't steal from the merchant. Wealthy or not, they were part of his town. If he found paper, yeah, singular, in one of the noble's house, he'd take some, but as of yet, he hadn't. For as many coins as they had, paper was valuable enough they didn't leave it lying around where any passing rogue could get it. Right, I forgot to do that yet again. This time I'm going to replace everything. Could get it. P&'s Tim had gone in a second time only a few days ago, having having been before Tibbs in the random assignment of those who hadn't given coins to determine where they were in the order. Wow, that is wordy. And in order to determine, hadn't given coins to determine their position on the schedule. Harry had been there when the first list went up, and he had glared at Jekyll as if the man knew this was his idea. I knew it was his idea, but he hadn't ordered anyone to the cell or grabbed Jekyll to have a private talk. Jekyll had been sufficiently smug. Tibbs was sure the guard leader had talked with his team leader at some point, but they'd gotten away with that part of the quiet thumbing of their nose at what the guild wanted. Jekyll, doesn't matter how many rats there are, Kirina said. We can deal with them easily. Tibbs disagreed with her. It mattered, but she was right. Let's clear this floor, then we can go over the information. All right. She put the papers away. Squaring his shoulder, Jekyll led them to a trap room where, as he predicted, the triggers had been changed again. But Tibbs easily found them and led the way. Jekyll moved slower with a thoughtful expression. He just smiled when Tibbs raised an eyebrow. To his disappointment, the cache produced a set of archer's gloves, which Maz put on. Tibbs thought he was owed at least his shoes back, since they'd been destroyed in the dungeon, but he'd been the one to walk into the fire, so he didn't grumble too loudly. The boulders and warren room were simple, even if both had more creatures. Tibbs knew where the creatures were, even if he couldn't see them. They had his essence in them. Much less than people or even the animals in the town, but enough for him to not be surprised once by the rats and by the rats that's plural in the boulder room. In the Warren room, even knowing where the rabbits were, he only hit 1 out of 5 throws with his imbued knife, and he figured it had been a lucky shot. On the practice range, he couldn't hit a stationary target once out of 10 throws. He wasn't sure if throwing things would be something he got good at, but he enjoyed not having to get close to what he wanted to hit. The first boss fought back harder, managing one strike that could have ended the run before they'd reached the second floor. Jekyll had rushed it, and as they'd agreed, and the golem's whip caught him in the leg, sending him against the wall and out of the fight while Karina and Nez brought it down at a distance. Tiz was next to Jekyll before the golem crumbled. The fighter cursed loudly. "Don't move," Tibbs said. "Oh, really?" Jekyll replied. "Do you think that's funny?" Tibbs glared at the fighter. "No, I just need you to not move. I want to try something." He could sense the break in the lower leg, the way the essence flowed. The flow of essence staggered. Everyone has small staggers like this one, but this was the first time Tibbs could tell why it happened. The injury to the body affected how the essence flowed. Could the flow affect the injury? He reached for the essence in the leg and tried to move it back into place, but he couldn't grasp it. It wasn't because there was earth tinting it. It still felt like his essence. He didn't have the time to. He reached for the essence in the leg and tried to move it back into place, but he couldn't grasp it. It wasn't because there was earth tinting it. It still felt like in essence. This it still felt like his essence. This is going to be another one. He didn't have the time to investigate that now. Yet something else to work on. He took his essence and pushed it into Jekyll's leg. There was resistance, but the fighter didn't react to the intrusion. So Tibbs decided it wasn't a problem. He couldn't grab Jekyll's essence with his, but there was some interaction. He could feel where they made contact. Tibbs wrapped his essence around the flow of Jekyll's, creating a tube that made him realize the flow was in the center of the leg, sort of where the bone was. Another question for later, if he could ever think of a way to ask without revealing his secret. He made his essence as dense as he could, using up 1/4 of his reserve. When it was done, he had an opaque shell around the staggered essence in the fighter. Right, staggered was injured. He willed it straight. Jekyll yelled in pain, then was panting. "What in the infinite abyss did you do?" "I'm not sure. How do you feel?" To him, the essence felt like it was flowing properly. Jekyll opened his mouth, really ready to yell, but paused, then frowned. "Now that, actually." He got to his feet. "Did you heal him?" Karina asked, awe in her voice. "I don't know," Tibbs replied, observing how his essence reacted to Tibbs putting weight on it. "I think you did," the Fisher said, also awed. He smiled. "Do you have any idea how much this changes things, Tibbs?" Things? Yeah. This is a comma. The questions become here. So long as we can survive a fight, you can heal us. We're going to get to the second floor boss without any problems. "Don't be so sure," Tibbs replied. "That used a lot of my reserve, and I don't know how to speed up refilling it." Can't you do like I do with firing out of the sensor?" Miss asked. "If Tibbs our healer," Kamdar said at the same time, should we not keep him at the back so he will not get injured? himself. I'm not staying out of the fight. I'm not staying out of the fighting, Tibs stated. And the only place I can sense my essence is in other people and the creatures in the creatures the dungeon makes. What happens if you pull it out of someone? Jekyll asked as he headed for the chest. I don't know if I can, Jekyll said, trying to explain it. I couldn't affect your essence directly. What I did was wrap mine around yours and put it back in place. So you splintered my essence? Fighter asked as he opened it. I guess. But is his leg healed? Karina asked. He can stand on it, Mez said. Isn't that what healing means? Not if the damage remain or return once Tibs removes his essence, Kamdar said. This is different from anything I have heard regarding healing. You've heard a lot? Karina asked in a snide tone, and Tibs glared at the cleric before he opened his mouth. He needed to figure out what the problem was. They seemed to do okay these last weeks. I have heard enough. Kamdar stopped there, and Tibs thought the man would throw a tantrum. What? Wait, what? What the hell? Okay, you know what? That is not. Full set of leather armor, Jekyll called, not seeing any place to hide things on it. Do you want to check, Tibs? What's the quality like? He asked, not taking his eyes off the sorceress and cleric. Not much better than what the guild first gave us. Did the dungeon lower the rewards now that there's a second floor there? Now that the second floor is there? It makes sense, Karina said, joining him. If we got things like a shield or other stuff we had before, there wouldn't be much incentive to go on the second floor. I'd still go. Jekyll motioned Mez over. Yes, but you are unabashedly greedy, she replied. Not everyone is. Tibs walked up to Kamdar, glaring at him. Stop doing that, he said, lowering his voice. And by that, you mean... You know what? I need... There needs to be something. I have no idea what the tantrum... Where I was trying to go with the tantrum thing. Stop doing that, he said, lowering his voice. And by that, you mean? The cleric asked, his voice also low, acting like he knows something about Karina. Why do you think I am acting? Tibs closed his eyes and reminded himself Kamdar was a teammate. He didn't stab teammate. Even Jekyll didn't deserve that. He opened them and let out a breath. If you found some secret about her, you don't use it to hurt her. She's a teammate, a friend. The man's lips tightened. I think you may be giving her more credit than she deserves. And what I know isn't a secret. She is simply, well, I don't know what the problem is with having white blood, and she doesn't. She bleeds red like everyone else. She bled defending us. She helped you. If you want off the team, you need to tell us. Kamdar's face darkened momentarily. Then he realized, I do not wish to leave your team. You have taken me in when I suspect no one else would have. I apologize for letting my prejudice affect my interaction with your teammates. We'll do better. It might help if you told us what the problem was. It might help if you told us what the problem is. The man shook his head. I fear all my confession would do is make matters worse. I thank you for your understanding, Tibs. You are a special kind of person. Tibs snorted. I've just lost too many friends to the dungeon. I don't want to lose them to stupid stuff like arguments. Are you two done conspiring against us? Jekyll called. There's a second floor waiting to be cleared. Tibs looked at Kamdar, who nodded. I'm not conspiring, Tibs said, heading for the stair. I'm convincing Kamdar we're all his friends. And you are very convincing, Tibs, the clerk answered. Maybe you can convince the dungeon to be our friends and just give us all the loot, Jekyll asked. I don't think it's that nice, Tibs replied, starting down the stairs. Why does it do that? Tibs complaining, entering the first room. Karina, show me the paper again. I'm certain the path is wider on it. It was wider on our first run, Tibs said. He didn't like that there had been no hissing at any point. It made him feel like the dungeon wasn't paying attention to them. Couldn't decide if that was a good thing. Do you think it'll get narrower each run until it's gone? Karina asked. Seems to me the dungeon always gives us choices. Mez said. Taking it out would remove that, or we'd have to take the ledge. Or the water, Tibs added, looking down. It looked like it the last time. Even the essence mix felt the same. If the path becomes no wider than the ledge, if the path becomes no wider than the ledge, it may be, so we will take it. Jekyll should attempt it, since he will be able to climb out of the water even with a lack of ladders. I just like how you assume I'd fall. You will, Tibs replied. He could climb up too. He had the earth essence, and it hardly took any to make handholds. He wondered how much water he could freeze with the essence he had. He knew how much water he could generate, but since Karina could use her air essence to affect the essence of the air around her, he should be able to do something like that with water. Regardless, Jekyll said, I'd rather stay dry. We're taking the path. They've stopped the fighter before he stepped on it. After I check it. Why? Doesn't matter where the trigger line is. You remember how slow the slab dropped? I can walk fast enough not to be crushed by it. You're not remembering things correctly, Karina said. You'd have to run not to be crushed, but P and Stim didn't indicate it drops any faster. It's been 8 days, I said, and I'm with Tibs. I want to know if the dungeon has done changes at that time. I believe we can take for granted it has made changes, Kildare said. And we need to know so we don't die. Tibs fixed the fighter with a glare, and Jekyll raised his hand. You're the smart one, I concede. Tibs sensed for the essence as he inched his way along the path. Now that the dungeon could work with essence, he didn't trust it not to pull some trick, like getting the essence trigger to condense just as he stepped on it. This time, it was closer than it had been on their previous run, and from what Pian had indicated on the map. If he'd gone by that, he would have crossed it before even checking. The line's here, he said, and it's not fixed. That's 2 things different from the map. Karina said, can we trust it at this point? Seems early to throw it out, Mez replied. Tibs studied the line as it moved up and down. This was the chest, from his chest to the path. Everyone can sense essence now, right? Everyone but Kumdar answered they could. Tibs looked at the Carrick. I will point out that unlike you, I have not received formal training, and that as a cleric, the expectation of darkness places on me are different than those placed on you. Darkness got nothing to do with me, Jekyll said. The point remains. So you don't sense essence. This is a Commodore plays a game, keeps secret and all that, but I don't want him to outright lie, and he states the first time that he can do it. So now I don't want to go back and fix it. That's what this is all about. I'm not going back to fix that, so I'm adjusting things forward. The clerk smiled, and Tibs considered kicking him in the shin. He could do that with teammate. Or maybe now is the time to put Kumdar's word to the test. He decided against it. Maz, you got him under this one. I can sense another one, and I'm going to check it. He slipped under when it was at its highest and made it a dozen steps to the next one. This one moved left to right. This one moved left to right and back. Simple to pass, but it was the one after that which worried Tibs. He stepped around the line as it was on the left side of the path and stood before the last one. The two previous triggers in the same spot, up and down, left to right. At least they weren't too fast. He slipped in the opening and waited for the others on the other side. Kumdar first, he said as they approached, and the shuffling to get him to the front of the line was awkward. Any narrower, and they'd have to cross it one at a time. Tibs indicated the right side, the height of his hip. When I tell you, you go through there, it's as high as you can be. I am beginning to think this dungeon does not like anyone tall, the cleric said. You aren't that much taller than anyone here but me. You ready? Kumdar nodded, and when the line were synchronized, Tibs gave the signal and the cleric crossed. The cleric was across. Kirna and Nez crossed. Then Jacko, who was nearly past it when the slab came down before Karina and Mez crossed. Then Jackal, who was nearly past it, when the slab came down before anyone could react. Jackal was lying on the path, writhing in pain. His left foot was crushed in a bloody mess. Kumdar's Mez pulled him to the hall, and Tibs crouched next to him. Just like his foot, the essence there was shattered. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do anything. This is not like your leg. Try, Jekyll groaned. Tibs created an essence wrap around the shattered essence, and then reinforced it, having to use half of what he had left, even if the area was small. Having to use half what he had left, even before. Okay. Even if. Okay. Tibs created an essence wrap around the shattered essence, then reinforced it, having. Then reinforced it. He had to use half of what he had left, even if the air was smaller, before he was confident it was dense enough not to let anything through. He tightened it slowly, using what he felt of the right foot to guide the form. Jekyll screamed and Tibs stopped. Unless, the fighter panted, you're ripping my foot away? My foot off? Keep going. In the pause, Tibs was surprised to feel Jekyll's essence shift on its own, moving to resemble the right foot. If the essence wanted to have the right shape, this would be easier. He did his best to ignore the screams as he tightened the essence until it was a sheath over something identical to Jekyll's other foot. Jekyll no longer screamed, but he was panting hard and covered with sweat. I think it's best if we keep Tibs for really bad injuries. You mean like a crushed foot? Kirina asked. I'd rather not to go through that again. I don't think I could do this again, Tibs said, feeling strained. And whatever I do next is going to have to be simple. The more damaged the area is, the more essence it takes. It is nonetheless impressive, Kandar said. I would love to know what you have done. If you get hurt, I'm guessing you'll find out, Mez said, helping Jekyll to his feet. The fighter moved cautiously. What amazes me is that I'm not feeling any pain. It's like I've taken numbweed, but it only affects the area you've healed. He headed for the next room, and Tibs hurried to join him. Are you going to run in like nothing can hurt you? Not if you can't heal me, Jekyll replied, grinning. I couldn't heal you the last time. But the last time I was making a point. Tibs rolled his eyes. Jekyll cursed at the entrance of the room. Karina, the map's at 3, right? Yes. Either no one on Pion's team can count, or the dungeon changed things again, Bess said. 5 of them, Kamdar said with a shudder. We can take them, Bess said, stringing his bow. I can take one down by myself, but I'm going to have to stick to my regular explosive arrows after that. He smiled at Tibs. My version of the flame arrow is much more impressive than theirs. I'm with Mez, Jekyll said, but this is a team decision, and I will listen this time. We take them, Tibs said, watching the essence in the golem and feeling how empty his reserve felt. He didn't know how we'd done it with Big Bad. Big Bad? Big Brute. With Big Brute, but he knew he could do it, and BB had also been a golem just like these. Tibs willing? If Tibs is willing, Kamdar said, taking the staff off his back, then so am I. I'm not leaving you 4 to get yourself killed, Karina grumbled. I thank you, the cleric said. Mez, you start, Jekyll said before Karina replied. Then Kamdar, Tibs, and me rush in. Karina, I would love it if you could pull that wind clap that earned you the first win at the FFA. I can't promise that in an enclosed space like this, but I have a few new tricks that will help. Keep your distance, Tibs, until you're out of knives. Tibs said nothing. If he didn't answer, he couldn't be accused of lying. The heat from the arrow that formed as Mez pulled on the string was nothing like what Tibs had felt from the other fire archer. It was intense, but also focused. Even the essence was nothing like the others. It was in the arrow's form the fire made, with more at the tip and almost nothing at the string, which Tibs thought explained why it didn't burn through it. Mez let go, and it detonated on impact, sending rubbles all over the room, and pushed the other golems away. Tibs stared. No fire archer had ever done anything like that. Tibs would have heard. If you're counting on me to do all the damage, Mez said, touching a regular arrow, you will be disappointed. Jekyll shook himself. Go! Tibs followed the fighter in, sensing the essence in the golem. Unlike that of the runners, it had no color. It was identical to that in his reserve. He threw a knife at the wall, and one of the golems struck that spot. Tibs stepped for it, then cursed as his shoes creaked, and he jumped out of the way from another whip. Jekyll was pounding one to rubble. One had chunks missing as another arrow exploded in his chest. The third was in the middle of a whirlwind that seemed to lift it off the ground, and the fourth, Tibs cursed as Kamdar fell, staff flying into 2 different directions, blocking a whip strike. Tibs ran and jumped on the golem's back, wrapping his arm around its neck. He touched it. That was all that had been needed the last time. The contact had been enough to suck the essence into him. So why wasn't it happening now? He lowered his head as the golem reached back for him. He had been dying. He wasn't going there for this one. He reached for the essence in the golem and pulled on it as he would when looking to refill his reserve. Instead of the slow trickle, as soon as he willed it to happen, Tibs fell through the rubble the golem turned into. Wait, someone said as Tibs got to his feet. How did he do that? Tibs grinned as he looked for where the voice came from. Ganny, did you see that? That was amazing, but how did he do it? I knew I'd heard you, Tibs yelled at the dungeon. And this concludes chapter 52. If you are enjoying this, please subscribe and hit the bell. Share with your friends. Hit the thumbs up. If you want to read the whole story, it is on Royal Road. The link is in the note, along with the link to my Patreon, should you want to support me. And with that, I Shall wish you a good day.